doing the hustle, man, doing good. So yeah, trying to take a little bit of time to prepare for Christmas and spend some time with the family. But right now it's in full hustle mode, trying to give everyone some new Christmas presents through call action. So
there you go. There you go. Jesse, I have to give you this. And while we wait for some of our visitors to come on, let me get some of you on Facebook. Come on, buddies. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. We're talking about some very, very, very exciting shit today. And what we're doing is, Jesse, I've seen your business grow over the last 12 months. And I have, when we first met was actually at the Club Wealth event now over a year ago. And
correct.
This is when text messaging, this whole autoresponder, I sort of started to get introduced into it in the advanced way that you're doing it. And what was, you guys, here's why we're doing this webinar. The 1990s called and they want their marketing back. Take it. Drip emails are fucking dead. I don't care what anybody says. They are not, they are dead. In real estate, at least. I'm not saying for all other businesses, right? I have an email list for my brand. Jesse has an email list for his. I'm talking about in real estate lead generation. And I'm not saying they're totally dead. Come on, let's give them a little bit of slack. That's fine. But I'm just telling you, this works way better. And I want to go through and spend a little bit of time before we get in through the ins and outs of everything that Jesse is going to share with us today. But I want to talk about the simplification of this. And
Mike, before you get too started on this, we're going to do this kind of podcasty style. So I'm going to touch base on why the email is a little bit dead, right? So let's think about this for a second. You, me, white collar people that are behind a computer, and that's how we work. Email is alive for us, right? But out of your customers, if you think of the area that you're currently living in, and let's say your demographic profile of your leads in your area, if you're in an area where 50% of your customers might be construction workers and people that are not necessarily behind a computer, this is the vast majority of people that are swinging hammers, people that are nurses, that are work at the mall, and so on and so forth. Those people are not checking that email all of the time. And by the time that they've, searched on real estate sites, a bunch of different places, they're getting tons of email from a bunch of different places. So we just need to kind of break that pattern and surface to the top. And that's the trick. And that's why email is being less effective over time, because if I'm a truck driver, I'm not checking it in the moment as those leads are coming in, and I might check it once a week. And by the time I get in there might be 1,000 emails ahead of yours. So I think that that's an important thing to think of, email, and why text might be a little bit more, a little more powerful, and why email may be slowly dying down a little bit. So
totally agree. And here's where I think is happening in the real estate business. There's a paradigm shift coming, and not just in real estate, in all businesses, but everything has gone more personable as opposed to professional. So what I'm seeing on a lot of this stuff is that realtors today, they're trying to be salespeople when really we're in a service-based business. So the point of marketing and creating leads, and sometimes it's almost like, let's check this box and I make myself feel better because I got 25 opt-ins today, or I got 25 leads. But at the end of the day, the whole point of creating a lead is to create engagement, because engagement leads to conversation. Conversation leads to trust. Trust leads to getting hired. Getting hired leads to, of course, you making money. And what text messaging doesn't, and Jesse, tell me if you disagree with me, but I think that this is the ultimate way to create engagement with marketing lead generation that you're doing, which should be the whole point. When you get somebody on the phone, you have a better chance of warming up to them, building trust, answering their questions, and just overall better serving them. And that's really what this is about. Text messaging is a thing that creates engagement. Now, in addition to what you said, Jesse, is why else do you see that, besides the obvious, but give a couple other points about why this creates so much more engagement than a text-based drip email per se.
Sure. So, at the end of the day, first let's look at the device. What happened is we've basically had a mobile revolution take place. The iPhone is only 10 years old, right? But if we think about everything that it's done for us and everything that it has impacted, it's insane, right? So I'll show you, let me just share my screen really quick here, and let me just show you a really quick screenshot so that we can kind of think of some of this stuff here real quick. So for example, if you take a look at this, 10 years old, right? Think of all of the products that that phone has now disrupted, right? Are we carrying a camera? We don't need a flashlight. We don't need a radio. We don't need a map. We don't even need a landline anymore. We've already seen this basically change completely. We don't need a watch. We don't need a clock. Most of our books we can read, the calendar, the newspaper, everything is coming through on that single mobile device. So it's really become the center of everyone's universe. And when we think about it compared to email, the thing is that the text notification, texting originally started off that you text your friends and family first. So when you make that transition into texting versus an email, like my mom doesn't send me email, your mom doesn't send you email, right? They probably send you text messages or maybe Facebook messages. But that's the difference, is when you're able to take that relationship and convert it into a personal relationship, that initial impression through text makes it feel more personal. And that's why it's so much more powerful than anything else. Aside than it just being more instantaneous, we already know that 97% of text messages are read in 3 minutes or less. 60% of all mobile search right now is done on a mobile phone. All of those other kind of stats that are, that are floating out there. But if we look at the core reasoning why text messaging is important and why it's so good for business is this: we do business with people that we know, like, and trust.
Amen.
The first step of that is transitioning that relationship into one of knowing, liking, and trusting that person. And so when you engage in text, the initial feeling that you get when you start texting with someone feels significantly more personal. And so it just accelerates that transition from a cold relationship to one where you feel like you're able to kind of communicate with someone much more rapidly. And when we take a look at, NAR stats, I think I might have them floating around in here. Let me just take a look at some stats. Maybe I don't. But, the three main qualities that people are looking for is A, who's most responsive. B, basically, the person that they have the most rapport with or the most knowledgeable, and the person that they trust. But if we think of if that's how consumers are picking agents, number one, to be responsive, even if you respond to the email quickly, does that mean that they're going to see it quickly? Nope. No, right? And you're going to get beat out by whoever basically sends a text message first. Number two is when you do send that text message, now it's instantaneous, it's in their face, there's no avoiding it. That person is going to most likely respond when it's convenient for them. And the thing is that if they're at some kind of work or some kind of job, they can always pull out their phone and reply back to a text. It's not like taking a phone call. And so you have these levels that as soon as you do that, you solve the first thing that is the reason why most people pick an agent, which is being responsive. And as you start that text engagement, now you can start showing your knowledge. And that gets solidified at the end when you're able to get onto a phone call as quickly as possible. So
it's
that's
like
what you want to do. So
and I want to rephrase this so everybody, this is like dating. All right. So the very first thing, like if and it's no different in my business for real estate marketing, dude, it's no different for Jesse's business in call action. Or, I mean, if I was selling, timeshares, it would be the same freaking thing. I actually like saying that, when you're engaging in a new conversation with a potential prospect and or lead, the very first transaction that happens is within that first 15 seconds of engagement.
Correct.
Trust, right?
Correct.
The very first thing is about taking the conversation to the next stage. No differently than when I met my wife and I was like, hey, I had to tell a joke up front. If I didn't tell that joke, would I be married right now? Who the hell knows? I have no freaking idea. Right. But that joke was my icebreaker to be like, oh my God. And then when she laughed, I was like, someone actually likes my jokes. I'm going to start hanging out with her a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
But that first bit, the pattern interrupt happens when somebody's opting into a house. And we're going to go through several applications of what we're talking about as we get through this call. But let's use the signage, for example. When you make it easy to get the information that you want through using like one of Jesse's sign writers or using the text on the call, not only is the information instantaneous, but the way the communication is delivered is equally as important. Because it's more personable in nature. Like Jesse was the first one to come out with emojis in his service, which I thought was absolutely genius because I'm big on communicating more effectively. That's like my whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Attracting business through communication.
we know that basically in sales and communication, I mean, cadence, tone, body language, all of those kind of things are much more important than even basically the words that are coming out of your voice.
Yeah.
Right? So if we think about that, if someone seems enthusiastic and you have an enthusiastic personality, your guys are going to match. You're going to have this chameleon kind of effect of build rapport. Basics of rapport are basically mirroring that person at the other end. And so if you're sending email, it's pretty hard to send over emotions other than maybe a couple exclamation points and things like that. And that's really easy for it to kind of get lost. But there's even a scientific study that shows that an emoji with basically a smiley face conveys the same emotion. It conveys the same emotion as if I was smiling right now at you when they see that. And so that's what makes it so much more effective and feel personal, because all of a sudden you start feeling kind of connected, basically. So
you're exactly right. We do a lot of stuff with video, and what we tell our agents all the time is like, this is all about communication. Video isn't a conversion machine. It's a better form of communication. It allows you to express your message and convey it a lot more effectively because of how communication is perceived, which is, 90% of all communication is going to be based upon the tone and the body language that you're actually using when you're communicating, not what you're actually saying. As a matter of fact, statistically, it's more like 10% of people actually remember what the hell you're actually saying. Right. And if you guys don't believe me, let me put this in the context for real estate agents, because how many times, let's say you are working with a brand new buyer, the very first time you meet that buyer, you may go over some sort of buyer consult with them. During that time, you talk about closing costs and you outline the closing costs for that buyer. 3 weeks down the road, you're out there showing houses. And again, you're talking about, hey, here's the closing costs on this house at this price point. All right. You put the buyer in escrow, you go under contract, and the lender sends the buyer the freaking closing costs. And they'll tell, here's your closing costs. It's in writing. Now, 2 days before closing, everyone's an asshole because nobody told the client about the closing costs. The truth is because people remember more. It's more memorable on how we say something than as opposed to what we're actually saying. And that's, the delivery and the magic with text messaging is the form of it being so personable, and communication is what gets people, in my opinion, to be like, oh my God, this is a real person.
Correct.
They have feelings. They're not just trying to sell me on something like that's crazy. And when you can convey that level of engagement and I don't even know what's the right word, personification, when you could humanize your brand and personalize it in communication from a sales perspective back down to their level, I think it's extremely powerful.
Well, let's use another example. Let's think of something as simple as, are we all stupid that we're willing to pay $5 for a cup of coffee, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
If you think of the Starbucks experience that they're creating, right? It's this idea that's very simple thing of them writing your name on the cup and calling out your name. And if you go to your local Starbucks community, that person's going to be like, hey, Mike, how's it going? Are you doing the double frappe latte or whatever, the unicorn rainbow sprinkle $9, drink. And if you think of that success, it's probably more so because of the feeling that we get that we're being acknowledged as a human, that personalization of that experience and connecting with someone is why basically that is so successful and why we're willing to pay a little bit more, right? We're willing to do that little luxury on a daily basis because someone just remembers us by name. And if you see this across all of the businesses, banks are trying to be a little bit more personal. Everything that's out there is trying to basically reconnect and make it human again, because we don't want to be a number. The whole thing with social media being so popular is because people want to connect with other people, right? They want to feel and say like, here's me, connect with me as a person and let me give you my thoughts and my ideas. And that personalization is what's so powerful. And that's what comes through when you start sending text messages and communicating via text with people.
So when we first met, Jessie, and we're going to get into this too, folks, is because what Jessie has done is, at first it was just about, let's create some engagement. But now Jessie's built out multi-step autoresponder sequences through the form of video text, voice broadcast, text messaging. And honestly, the stuff is like working in the background. I tell people about your service, and I'm a big fan of your service. So you guys, by no means are we trying to be like, go buy Jessie's call action. But if you do it, because I think it's the best one out there. But regardless of what you do, I believe that what you've built is today it can be an ISA replacement. I believe it can be robotic to a sense, because what it does is when you build it out right, and what it does, and we're going to get right into the application of this right after this. But what it does is it creates conversations for you. I mean, what the hell's the point? The hardest part about the lead gen aspect is the follow-up. And we see it all the time in groups like Coats, and everyone's like, the keys in the follow-up, speed to the lead, follow-up. And it's exactly right. Like, what are the stats on the average number of touches to a cold lead, someone you've never met before that may have opted in? What are the stats for the average number of touches that you have to follow up until they actually respond?
Yeah, so on text messaging, and we have a lot of data on this, we're seeing if it's an email lead that came in and we're starting to engage that email lead, on average, we need somewhere between 4 and 8 touches going outbound before that person will even respond. And so occasionally you're going to get, that onesie twosie, they're going to respond almost right away. But the vast majority of the time, it's going to be a little ways. And here's the reason why. If you kind of think of what happens, basically, when someone sends in an inquiry, you may not be the only inquiry that they're sending in. They may have sent it through Zillow or through your website or through Realtor.com or through Redfin or somewhere else, because they're probably doing some kind of home search session. And when they sent in those requests to all of those people are calling back all at the same time as well. And they don't know who it is that's actually responding back the first time. So A, by using text messages, that gets you kind of in there very, very quickly. And B is most of us won't answer the phone if we don't recognize the caller ID. So if my phone starts blowing up with some random phone number that I don't recognize, there's a very high likelihood that I'm going to just block that phone number. So then thereafter, everything that you do, you're never going to get through that customer. So it's really important by sending the text message first. What we tend to find basically is now they have a reference point of who's trying to get a hold of them and which phone number is trying to reach them. And that helps basically the overall transaction in terms of being able to engage them and take it to the next level of getting them on the phone, because that personalization with that person becomes just basically critical. So,
what's really interesting is that you're exactly right. And what it is when somebody opts in or inquires on something they want to find online, or if it's a sign, however they're using your service, they want the information immediately. And realistically, what's happening is that they're not checking their email immediately. And then therefore they're forgetting what the hell they opted in for 3 hours later when the kid's diaper needs a changing. And then, they're running around all over the place. They have to go, they get called, and they get sidetracked, and they forget about it. So it's automated speed to lead in the sense that people all check their text messages. And I check all of my text messages. I don't really miss one. And I think that goes for virtually everyone that exists.
Exactly.
So that's why it creates engagement. Now let's get into the application of this, because I know a lot of people are going to be asking. So Jessie's company, a lot of you already know what call action is, but you could build out several different sequences. You could build out you could tie it to different lead sources, and I'm going to let Jessie take over. But one of my favorite uses for it, I want to start, if it's okay, start with signage. How you use it in signage. And I want to share some of the stuff we're doing here in San Diego. And then I want to hear your best practices, and then we'll get into the drips on the second half of this.
So when you're talking signage, are you talking more so our
text to view the pic? Yeah, the text tool.
Got it. All right, no problem. So let me just show that to you here really quick. Give me 1 second. I just need to move some screens around.
So what we're doing with the signage is, so I'll give you an example. There's an agent here in the San Diego office that I'm at now, Big Block. And they're call action users. They have 50 signs in the yard, generating 3 to 5 sign calls a week. So do the freaking math. I was trying to tell them the other day, I'm like, you guys, you are Zillow. You don't need to, to replace the wheel, because I believe that a sign call is a more qualified lead than anything, because someone's actually in front of the house, looking at it. And what I love about this is that there's one problem with real estate signage. And that's as a consumer, when they drive by, everyone says the same thing. What the fuck is it? Is it a 4-bedroom? Is it a 2-bedroom? Is it a 3-bedroom? How many baths? What's the price? What do the pictures look like? And there's so many questions we have. So the call to action on the signs is you want to see the price and the pics? Sweet. Here's how you get the info. So go ahead, Jessie. It's so clever.
So what we basically do is we use a text tool. So one thing about sending people to, let's say, a custom landing page or something, like there's a little bit of a trend for, or was a little bit more in the past, basically, of using a shortened URL or basically a URL to land on that particular property. The problem is just the fact that they land on the property, there's a lot more friction. I got to type the URL, and then when I land there, I still don't capture anything. I don't know who the customer is. Maybe I have a Facebook pixel and I can kind of retarget that person over time. So we gave this a lot of thought, like what's the best way for us to generate leads from the street in a manner that is going to get you what ultimately we really need, which is the phone number. Right? If we think of lead gen right now, it's kind of funny. We're still doing it like it was the 1990s using your example. We have basically a form and we basically drop that form in front of that person. And ideally, we hope for them to give us some information. And ultimately, we really want them to fill out their phone number. Mm-hmm. Because even if I get a completed email form, all that I'm going to try and do is get them back on the phone. So instead, if we remove the form friction and we use text messaging, you're automatically capturing the phone number to begin with. And this is a whole paradigm shift in terms of lead generation. Because if you think of the steps and just mentally kind of play that out, what you're doing by putting a form in front of someone is just making things more difficult. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to avoid now with the cell phone, right? So what we do is we use something, if you're seeing my screen here,
yep,
we have basically our text tool. So what you're able to do is basically create a custom key, what we call a keyword for people to send a text message to in order to receive information instantaneously. And if we think of the principle of the internet, that's why it exploded, is that it makes it easy for me to get what I want when I want it on my own terms. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of text messaging for information is basically rapidly gaining speed because it's self-service, right? I can send the information when I want it, don't need to talk to anybody, get the information that I want. And those of you that, really pay attention to marketing, take a few moments when you're watching TV late at night and look at those famous commercials that are trying to sell you crap, okay? You're gonna notice that everyone now is starting to run a text for info campaign. They're no longer trying to push you over to basically a website, right? So really be hyper aware of this late at night. Watch TV, watch those commercials, and you're gonna see the famous text this code to get this information. It's all over the place. So what we're doing is introducing it on the street. You're able to build this custom key, and when someone sends that key, we're gonna return back a dedicated response. So really, really simple. And this response can contain links, can contain emojis, can contain everything. But the more important part is the moment that they sent that text, we've already captured basically the valid phone number of that person. We know who it is. We know their intent or their interest in the product that they're currently looking at. And if you're using call action, you can actually attach a full drip campaign to automate the entire follow-up for that specific property. It's really, really powerful.
So I want to touch up on a couple things that you just said. And here's what I love about the text response is that I love the fact that you could put emojis in there. And I love the fact that, and tell me your opinion on this. My advice is to make it as personable as possible and less professional. And like one of the tools that we tested it and we never done enough with it. You probably have much more data on this, but people want to do business with people, not robots, and people want to do business with people, not salespeople. So, I love like when you say here's the property website link. I'll follow back to make sure you got it in 30 minutes. I'm sorry, I'm taking my kid to the karate class or whatever. Right. Something like that is like, holy crap, this wasn't automated. This is just like a person that's calling me back and they actually went out of their way. Wow. What great service. Now the speed of the lead first, you have to share the stats that you had with this. You promoted them, you put them the other day, but the percentage of people that look for their realtor in terms of the response time and what that does for the psyche up here. I forget the stat, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yep. So here, I'll show you this really quickly. So here's basically a deck. So here's the top 5 reasons why agents get selected by customers, right? Because really they're the ones doing the selecting, not us. Right. So here's some really interesting stuff. This comes from the California Association of Realtors. And so if you look at these middle stats right in here, simply being the first person to respond, you have over a 10% chance of them selecting you. This is incredible, right? Here, previously used agents. Now that's applicable if basically it's a move up buyer. But if we think of first time home buyers, they've never previously used an agent. So it might be a word of mouth referral, and that'll come from that referral type business.
Yep.
And if you look at the combination of all of these, first to respond, 13%, most responsive, 22%. When we add those two things together, basically, we're already at 35%. So a third of buyers are picking you by first to respond or most responsive. And that's almost interchangeable if you really think about it. Most aggressive. Now, this doesn't mean because you got the biggest muscle and you're beating the guy over the head with a club, right? It just means that you're doing the most aggressive follow-up, that you're being consistent in your follow-up. And this is another 13%. So when you add those three figures together, it's nearly 50% of people are just going to pick the agent that either first is to respond and follows up the most, right? Look at knowledge, how little it really has impact. Because once you've done this, you're able to build rapport. And if they really like you and you match their cadence and your rapport building skills and your sales skills are good, the knowledge doesn't matter if you're number one or number 1,000, right?
Yep.
It's really interesting. This is a business. Real estate is a business where you can get a newly licensed person and the most seasoned professional in the world, and they can make the same exact amount of money just with every single customer.
It's pretty, this is like, and this is backwards from how it should be. You know, you're making one of the largest financial investments in your life.
Right.
But look what this is doing though. The first to respond is also the most responsive and also tends to be the most aggressive. That's the automation and the drip going on in the background. Right. And what's happening, people choose agents that they know, like, and trust. And when you're messing around with someone's largest financial decision, I'm sorry, most people want the most aggressive. They want a responsive agent. Right. And it's very, very, very important. Now and again, a lot of this is to get their permission to continue the conversation. Yeah. So you could take it offline and you could take it in personable. Like, so correct. The automation is basically, I wouldn't say describing, but it's painting the picture of like, oh my God, this agent is responsive, first to respond. They're pretty aggressive. It outlines the character traits of what people look for when they choose an agent, in other words, without you having to say it. And that's why it's so powerful. Right. Here's the interesting part. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that might be applicable towards buyers, but I'm a kick butt listing agent. And so this is not as important as a listing agent because most of my business comes with referrals. Right. Now, take a look at this. Sellers, the stats are even more important for them. And here's the reason why. Never that I know of does a seller who owns a piece of property, their primary residence, just get up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to sell my house, right? Because in their mind, there's something else that's pushing them to make this move. Maybe they want to move cross country. They need to be closer to their friends. They need to upsize, downsize, whatever it might be. But they become buyers first. And so what happens is they start to send out inquiries and start to try and find the agent and get information. So they're getting the experience of being a consumer first before working with the listing agent. So what ends up happening is we know that there's a lot of stats out there. For example, in this, it shows basically the gap that 50% of people expect an instant response, but only 10 or 15% of people or 18% of people actually deliver that instant response. So if you're a listing agent and you're going into a listing, you're saying, I'm going to sell your property for you, right? And in their mind, they're thinking, yeah, that's what a lot of other agents thought, or a lot of other agents thought when they hired their listing agents, because when I called that sign, I never got a call back, or it took an hour to call back. So I don't know how those agents are selling property, but the agent that I know that's going to sell my property is the guy who's answering the phone, because if they are getting an inquiry off of that yard sign, that consumer, just like me as a buyer who's made those phone calls, I want someone to pick up the phone. When someone doesn't pick up, it's frustrating for me as a buyer. And so I'm going to hire the agent who is basically going to deliver this service. And that's why it's more important for a listing agent than even a buyer's agent to be highly responsive. It's really fascinating stuff. Totally agree with every single thing you said. Those stats are just sort of paint that picture.
Yep.
So think about it like from the signage. And so I want to talk about some different applications we could use. So what we're talking about is we're implementing coming soon programs with a lot of the agents I'm working with here. And part of those coming soon programs, especially we're in Southern California, so it's a very tight inventory market.
Yep.
And when, I don't care what anyone says, but if you want a better chance to pick up leads and leverage, like when you take a listing, the first goal should be to please the client first and foremost, but the second goal should not be to sell the listing. It should be to leverage it for spin-off business.
Correct.
The listings and your transactions becomes the content that you create and the excuse to market your brand, in my opinion. Yep. So what I mean by that is that the coming soon thing is, in a tight inventory market that everyone wants what everyone else doesn't have. And what that means today is off-market properties. All right.
Correct.
So what you can be doing as an agent is you could be popping in the sign a couple weeks earlier. You could be running some Facebook ads and you could be saying, hey, this property is going to be going live on the market, very soon.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
So you're building the urgency up to it. Now, don't be surprised if you actually sell the listing if you know what you're doing on Facebook targeting. It's not that hard. You're going to be able to target people down there and get the word out there. But when you build your own property site and you're sending this traffic there, people want what everyone else wants. People will pay more for something they fear will maybe be gone tomorrow. And the marketing on the listing side is nothing more than a giant mindfuck. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's our job to paint the urgency around the property and to make the property seem so freaking valuable that everybody wants it. We're marketers, okay? That's our job as a listing agent. All right, and excuse my language. This is just sort of how I roll. But the point is that you could leverage this for so much spin-off business. Now, even in the event that you don't sell the house during those first 2 weeks, what did you do? You just built up a bunch of urgency for the first open house on that weekend, right?
Right.
And it's these types of strategies that sellers are now looking for their agents to supply, because the truth is that your MLS listing and the sign in the yard is Redfin's marketing plan. And I'm sorry, but if that's what you're going to do for your listings, I'm a seller, I'm just going to go hire Redfin. And I do think that I would save the 1 to 1.5% at that point. And that's the way this business is going.
No, it's interesting. We see agents posting coming soons, but they make the most classic mistake, right? What we're seeing is people will say, all right, coming soon. And then they put the address, they put the price, they put everything. You're not leveraging that opportunity. You've already worked so hard to get basically a listing. And what you got to do is you got to maximize the revenue potential of that particular listing. And there's a couple different ways that you could do that. Number one is you want to use it to build a list of the most motivated customers in the surrounding area. Number two, you would love to basically use it to identify sellers in the surrounding area. And this is, you want a listing begets other listings. And this is really, really powerful. So we'll show you a small example in here. If you're looking at my screen, we have an option to do what we call an email collection. And so what call action you could do is you can run a sign that says coming soon, and it could say simply text your email to get details and be registered of first availability, right? Now, think about this. What call action is going to do is that we're asking people to send in their text message with their valid email. When the system gets a valid email, we're going to create that profile of that particular lead. And obviously you got the valid phone number, the most important thing. You have engaged that person with text and you've built an email list all simultaneously with one simple sign that feels a lot less friction. It feels less, I feel like I'm not giving up as much when you text an email to someone than landing on the landing page and filling out a form. What feels much more personal if you just think about it as a person? And so it's critical to maximize that opportunity. What we know, again, 50% of people, whoever that make that phone call about a listing, whoever shows that property is the one that's going to sell it. that person is going to be like, you know what? I like it. I like the floor plan. What do I do next? And 50% of the time, the person that says, okay, well, let's write the offer, that buyer is going to say yes, because there's no perceived cost to using the services. Their goal initially by making the inquiry, the task that they're trying to accomplish is see the inside of the house. What we need to change our mental model of leads is those leads are not looking for agents. They're trying to accomplish a task. And the task is, I want to get inside and feel that floor plan, right? Because that's not available in pictures. So, you know, kind of circling back in reference to that sign writer, we find that by putting on the sign writer text for floor plans, this is information that's not available anywhere usually. You could get this done by Home Depot for like $100. You do a nice PDF. It's click downloadable directly from that text message. You're going to generate so many leads from that because people are curious about that.
Yep.
And now you're going to start identifying people. And if you're using call action, we do that reverse data append. We're going to try and find the address that they're in. And are they an owner? So oftentimes we're able to identify nosy neighbors that are sending in text messages.
I was gonna mention. I like the call to action or call to action on the sign. And folks, if you guys have, I saw a couple people raise their hands. You could go ahead and type into the chat box on the webinar, and we could go ahead and get your questions answered.
Sure.
Now, I agree, because what happens is like when you're in the neighborhood, people, and they see a house go up on the market, the first thing the neighbors think is like, holy shit, did he sell it for too low? Or hell yeah, how much money did I make? Right? Or how much is my house worth now? And it's one or the other. Like people, that's what everyone thinks. I mean, think about it. If your neighbor puts their house on the market and you own that house, what's your first thought? You're like, what's the sales price? Because you just want to see where you stand in. So
it's a baseline.
Absolutely. And then if the fact that owner is thinking about potentially selling or whatnot, one of the things they do is they look to see who's going to get them the highest and best price. And a lot of people are still under the impression, even though this isn't necessarily always true, but the agent who does local businesses tends to be the best one for the job. That's just the perception that most people have. So you're really just painting your own case study, in other words, on it. Now, here's another, so we got the signage. And then you could attach drip. We're going to go to the drip features in a second, but I want to talk about how we can use this on direct mail too.
For sure.
So one of the things that we're implementing, we're doing a lot of this through our system is, we have it so it's editable. You could create your own call to action. If you wanted to use a URL, go ahead. If you want to use a call action link, great, go ahead. I believe that you're right on what you said earlier. And I don't know if you guys have picked that up or not, but the truth is, like, people don't want to go into their small little phones as these phones have gotten a lot smaller, because my fingers are too big to type in a URL.
Yeah.
Right. So it's easier for me to just text in for the info I want. So imagine walking through your door and everyone sees. What I love about direct mail is that it's not cluttered. It's not like email today.
Right.
It stands out, and you're just listed and just sold. So what I like doing is sending the first just listed postcard. And the call to action is the same one that's on your signage, right? You want to see for how much. Yeah, you want to see for how much, and you already know that they are. Now, what's important about this is the targeting of the list of people you're sending it to first. All right. So you got to know your areas. We're not talking about doing an every door direct mail type of campaign, because you're going to see a lot of waste on that. I would much rather pay more money and reach a list of homeowners who have lived in the property for at least 5 years.
Right.
Now, that reason I know is that those people are more likely to have turnover. So if our goal is going to be, and from a seller's perspective, what we're really doing is targeting people who are most likely to turn over.
It's no different than Facebook, right?
It's no different than Facebook. Absolutely. So now what I like about it is you do the just listed. Now, when the property sells, I like creating a case study out of the listing. Basically, it's your listing presentation without you having to say and how you sold it. You just share that story, update your property page, and now send the same direct mail list, the just sold postcard.
Right. Yes. So, let's say a postcard that says, hey, figure out how much your neighbor sold his property for. And once you have the ability to go ahead and do this, they text in, and then you could say, like, we basically listed this property. We got 74 inquiries. Like, tell your whole success story in terms of what took place and define all of that. And so, at the end of that, you could say, and this impacts the value of your home. So if you're curious to find out what your home is worth, just go ahead and give us a call or respond back to this text. And now it's a really simple way to eliminate friction and create basically conversations really, really quickly.
Yep.
Kind of going on something else on the direct mail piece. If you think about the way that we walk in and pick up our mail, right? If I walk in and pick up my mail, I'm probably sorting it over the trash can. And if I had to basically take out my phone and try and type in www.mylongurl.com, land on a web page, enter in my name, my phone number, my email address, just to get that information, that's a hell of a lot of friction, right? And I'm probably not going to do it. But if I already have my phone in my hand, I already know I can text with one finger a phone number and a code really, really easily to get that instantaneous information. And now you've sucked them in as quickly as possible into the experience and your ability to tell the story.
Yep.
And that's what's so powerful about it.
So I see a couple of mortgage brokers on this call here. Folks, your agents are looking for leads. Let's put the two things together. I mean, come on, let's help them out here. All right. It's pretty simple. Writings on the wall. I'm talking to you, Brian Weiss. So let's go through. All right. So I want to go into the next stage, because those are just direct response. Like those are print advertising. You have your signage, right? You have your direct mail you could be using this on. Now let's talk about online lead gen, because there's a lot of people who are buying portal leads, right? Or Facebook leads, and maybe you're doing lead ads or whatever you're doing online that you're creating leads. How does call action work for like that type of stuff? And I want to see sort of best practices. And again, guys, this is not a sales pitch for call action. I want you to understand on how important it is to create conversations through text. Call action just happens to be the best thing out there. So please go ahead and walk us through that.
Yeah. So ultimately what ends up happening is, if we think basically of communication, right? The lead kind of comes in, and what we want to do is we want to start that engagement with that person. And everything that I'm talking about right now, you could actually just do this on your phone by yourself if you have time, right? It's really, really simple. All we're doing is we're sending a text message. We just happen to be automating it for you based on the inbound inquiry. But what we tend to find basically is the first text message that goes out. In call action, what we're able to do is we take basically the inbound lead, and we're going to capture the information out of that. And we're going to simply send out a text message that says, hey, I just got your inquiry, your email inquiry from Zillow. What is a good time for us to schedule the showing? Now, think of this in a really simple manner, right? They're trying to accomplish a task. That task is basically get into that property. So your first text messages that go out really need to be centered on the customer experience of the task that they're trying to accomplish. Okay. They want to see a house. You know, they want to see a house because that's your lead source. Let them know in that text message that you're here to try and show them that house. Now, one of the things that we find that works really, really well, and let me see if I can share my screen here really quick. So I apologize for looking down.
Just in that example, so you're talking about, let's say I buy zip codes on Zillow, and someone's inquired on a certain zip. So you already are a certain property. I mean, so you know that they already are inquiring to see that house. So because you are, the context of the text message is, hey, thanks for inquiring about this house. You know, I'm happy to show it to you. When would you like to see it? So you can answer their question right away, because you already know what they're doing.
Exactly. In other words, don't try and sell yourself in those very first messages, because they really don't care.
Which people do all the time. People are like, oh, yeah, by the way, I've been in the business for 15,500 years, and no one cares.
Exactly. So here, if you're seeing basically call action behind here, are you seeing my screen by chance?
Yeah.
I can't really tell here. Okay. So we'll do something like this. So like here, you could see this is a template. In call action, we have basically some defined templates that you can do. So you could do something like, hi, I just received your request to view a home from realtor.com. Okay. If they just sent in that inquiry within 3 minutes and we're sending out this text message to them, they're going to feel like, hey, this is an agent and he's responding to me. We're anchoring the idea that it came from realtor.com, right? We don't need to go all the way down to the level of the individual property, because in a roundabout way, that's what you want for them to inquire back with you and say, which property is it? Because now you've created engagement and you have a conversation going. Okay. So in here, you'll say, you know, I'm on a call now. What is the best time for us to set up that showing appointment? Really simple, really powerful. And if I'm, you know, at a peak state of urgency, meaning I've been looking for a house for 12 to 18 months, and I get this text message right away, they're going to say, hey, I want to, you know, schedule as soon as possible, or I want to schedule tomorrow, or whatever it might be. They're going to tell you when they're available for that showing. And you've just eliminated all of the follow-up that you need to do, because you've already identified and basically set an appointment with just one text message. It's really, really simple what we need to do. What we see is you need to end every text message with a question. In call action, everything that we put in there that's a default response is always a question. because a question gets you a response creates engagement, engagements creates a conversation, and conversations will create a phone call at the end of the day. So let's say in here what we do is we can double back these kind of multiple text messages. So we try and solve a couple different issues. So first we tell them, hey, this is who it is. We put a reference point. We like to include basically your URL if you have an IDX search site in here, because what's going to happen is out of curiosity, they're going to click on that link. And now you've got that person into your ecosystem. That person now basically has been pixeled by you, so you can track them around. And instead of sending them to a single property website, now all of a sudden, if they don't like the property, they can go ahead and start searching for others and get that MLS connection right away. And your follow-up conversation is always going to be, get on our IDX because we have the real data. Now, what we find that also is very powerful, if you take a look here, we wait just 10 seconds after, and we say, hey, just to make it a little bit easier for us to connect, here's also all of my contact information, and we'll drop a little emoji in here. Now, that's what brings that personalization. And when you kind of do these two back-to-back kind of informations coming from a place of contribution, saying, I want to set up an appointment. I know that that's what you're interested in because I took the time to read your email, right? Yep. This is the idea. And then you say, and to make it easier, here's all of my contact information so that you can start establishing a little bit of trust. Here's my phone number. Here's my office. Here's everything. Now, this is so powerful because guess what ends up happening? The vast majority of the time, they're going to double click that information and that's going to get sucked into the phone. So then when you call from your office, you call from your mobile, maybe you call from, your CRM's got its own click to call. Now, all of a sudden, your caller ID is always going to appear and they'll know to basically answer. So then you could see here, we just kind of continue that conversation, going back to the original inquiry. 20 minutes later, if we haven't received a response from them, hey, when did you want to see this home? Okay, we already know that that's what they're interested in. This what starts to create the engagement. And then what we could do is a couple hours later, call action will allow you to record a voicemail and basically do a voicemail drop directly to that person's phone. So you could do something really simple and say, hey, it's Jessie. It's a couple hours ago, you sent me an inquiry. I was in a call back then. You found a piece of property on realtor.com. I sent you a couple text messages. I talked to the seller. I wanted to find out when do you want to go ahead and set up that appointment. If I leave that voicemail on that person's phone and I'm referencing 2 hours before because you can control when that message is going to be delivered, that feels like you're the one doing all of the work. And this is basically creates authenticity.
Yep.
We have one of our customers, Joe Malo, a couple days ago, we were chit-chatting about this and he gave me a tag phrase and I absolutely love it basically. And it's called authentic automation. Right? Yes. We're automating the process that we want to make it feel so authentic when that information is basically going out. So you could do, personalized things like this. And we have stuff for, here's kind of an example for a website registration, which is the same kind of lead, right? This person, their intent is not really that high because they're not looking for a piece of property. You just basically gated it to try and capture the lead. So think of it something like this, like, hey, I just saw you registered on my website. You're creating basically that connection. We start this one off directly with like a little emoji to instantly create the illusion that this is a real person behind here, right? That you're on top of it. You're checking your email. They know that when they register on that website, that lead is going to somewhere or that they just become a lead. So why not basically create that connection right away? So if we say something on here, we'll say, hey, if you find a home you like, please call or text me with questions. And then maybe 10 minutes or 10 seconds later, again, we're going to drop basically our contact information. So now give them our personal email address and anything. And then you can see we just kind of continue that conversation all the way down, ending it here a couple days later with just a simple video text to try and create that connection with that person. We want them to feel that they're working with a human because that's who I want to do business with.
So what happens when someone responds? Like, does it remove from the drip campaign? So like, just say like for this example on this campaign you have right here, there's a website registration email. Let's say they respond after that 1 day text only. Yeah. What happens to the rest of that drip?
It automatically stops and we just do the handoff directly to you. And it's up to you to, turn back around and jump into this. And again, everything that I've done here if you have any CRM, I don't care if it's Follow Up Boss, Contactually, Top Producer, any of those, you can set up an action plan of task, right? And that action plan of task could be the same exact thing here that I'm telling you to basically do. And you can manually do all of this stuff.
For sure.
So this is what's so powerful about it. If you start following these simple kind of techniques, whether it's with us or doing it manually or whatever it is, you know, depending on your budget that allows you, you're going to get basically a dramatically increased conversion on those leads that you're currently investing in. So,
and is it safe to say, like, from the agents that are having the most success with call action, is it safe to say that people in general, you know, let's say they're an agent's getting realtor.com, they're doing Zillow, they have their signage, they have the drip set up on all of them. And are they only following up with the ones that engage? Is that safe to say? And they're letting the rest sort of just, they're allowing people to raise their own hands and then follow up and focusing on just those, because it's time management as well, right? You want to, people who respond, you want to follow up with.
Exactly. So if we take a look at our business, right, we get paid when we're having real communications with people. We don't get paid at closing. And this is also an entirely different mind shift. You know, I spent 24 years as a mortgage lender and personally been involved in thousands of transactions around real estate and mortgages and stuff like that. And what I do know is that if I got on the phone with that person and established trust, and I was the first person to really establish trust with them, I was going to get that deal no matter what. And once I had the trust, it was really easy for me to basically let that consumer know that, hey, my agent, my assistant, my processor, whoever it is going to be calling, because they already have trust in me. And so what call action, you know, our mental shift is, we want you to spend as much time in that zone of having conversations. Because if you can have 8 one-hour conversations per day where you go long and deep with each one of those people, you're going to have more business than you know what to do with. The problem is it's really difficult for us to have enough lead flow and follow up with them enough to spend that time having those conversations. So we're looking at flipping the funnel. Our goal is, don't waste 80% of your time doing the outbound follow-up of leads. Automate all of that in a way that is that has authenticity, that feels like it's coming from you. And when that person responds back, you be that point person, because that's what makes you a sales professional. When the industry starts basically handing off that first point of impression to somebody else, and basically if there's a $8 an hour assistant that's non-licensed in a different country can build rapport with that customer, our industry is in trouble, right? Because this is what we are, is we're salespeople first and foremost. And so it's about building trust and building relationships and understanding how to develop that relationship. So this is why it's so critical for us to be that first point of contact.
Here's a common theme I'm seeing is how much is too much automation. And, you know, like, you know, my messaging, I'm all referral based. You know, I'm about building an audience out of your relationships and then keeping in front of them. But what I'm absolutely against is trying to automate communication with your database, right? And it's really the same thing when we're talking about cold or warm audiences on whom we're marketing. But the point is like, let's do a perfect example. Like, nobody wants any more turn back to clock emails, right? I'm sorry, but if you send me another one of those fucking things, I'm deleting. I'm getting the hell out of there, right? People don't want that cheesy boiler, you know, watered down marketing messages. Just no differently than people don't want. Do you like your financial planner emails that you get? No, I unsubscribe from every single one of them. Right. And you know, the authenticity is, so basically what you're saying is that once you get engagement, take that thing offline and follow up personally like a normal salesperson would. Use call action to identify people who are, because really what it's doing is it's a big funnel. The people who want to have a conversation today are more likely to be in the market. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes. It's almost a double funnel. So you have a funnel initially to generate the inquiry. And then when you get that inquiry that enters into your funnel, 97% of the time, it's going to require follow-up. Maybe you're going to get, 1 to 3% lay down deals, basically.
Correct.
Okay. But everything else is going to be a matter of staying top of mind, really, really long-term, and feeling like you're connecting with that particular person. And so we basically create the double funnel. So the idea of the double funnel is, now I have this funnel of people that I've identified. So right now that funnel is basically designed in a sense where you are doing all of this follow-up task. And we try to apply automation by sending text messages and emails and things like that. Okay.
Yep.
In call action, when we send those text messages, what ends up happening is that the text message is much more personal than the email to begin with. And when that person is ready to respond, it goes right back to you. And this is where you pick it right back up and continue that conversation and move them down another step closer to the bottom of the funnel. Or that might be the first step to just develop trust to where now, you know, that person is going to proactively reach out to you whenever they do find a piece of property and they have questions, because that's where we need to get to. You need to get to the point where when they see something, they think of you first. Mm-hmm. And the only way that that's going to happen is if you were the first person to go deep with them and develop, you know, trust. We like to use something where, you know, this idea of consultative type selling. Okay. There's a book out there called The Challenger Sell, which is really interesting. And what it is that consumers right now are really, really smart, right? They spend 8 to 12 months searching for property. They feel like they know more than us because they've got an aunt or an uncle or a cousin or a brother or a sister that was also a real estate agent. And you know, they may not necessarily think that highly of them. And they think that that person is pretty successful. So they're going to think like, hey, I've amassed all of this knowledge.
Yep.
If you ever read this book called The Challenger Sale, what's really interesting is you have to educate people on what they don't know. Mm-hmm. So let's just take something really simple, right? A buyer comes in. We know that 30 or 40% of buyers actually already own a piece of property, right? This is really big stuff that's kind of coming in. So if we just do something, a really simple script pivot that just says, hey, by the way, I know you want to see this particular piece of property, but will it involve any kind of contingency? Now, that's a full pattern interrupt. The customer at the other end is going to go, a contingency? Like, what the hell is a contingency? And now all of a sudden you've switched that over, and now you can start discussing about a contingency, and that's going to allow you to go deep. Hey, that basically means that you might need to sell a home. Do you have a home you need to sell? Now I just maximize my revenue potential because I just identified if that person owns another piece of home or another piece of property. And then I can go deep with that person and start to find out what's the reason why I need to move. What's your why? Because once you know the why, then it's much easier to circle back through and complete your sell when you see a piece of property that you know that they're interested and they might be a little bit on the fence. And then you could pull that why right back out and you could say, hey, you know, we can keep looking another 3 to 6 months, but I know you need to, you know, get here close to your grandkids. You know, time is basically moving forward and your grandkids are not getting young. So if you really want to, you know, set up this move, I think we should pull the trigger on this. Yep. Right? That why, when you start tugging at that why that is an emotional reason why they're selling, that's where you're going to have really high conversion. And that is only done by real sales professionals that understand how to build relationships and know the questions that they need to ask.
Yep.
Call Action's goal is let's take away the difficult part of that double funnel, meaning making all of those outbound tasks just to try and find when that person is ready to talk, when they have the mental bandwidth. Let's automate that seems authentic. And then when that person is ready to respond and have that 20-minute conversation, you're not feeling rushed. And you can take that time to go long and deep that very first conversation, because that's the agent who's going to win. And that's what we're trying to do, basically.
Speaking to their needs directly at that.
Exactly.
Very, very, very cool stuff. Very, very powerful stuff. I think we'll get this thing wrapped up. But the main thing I would add, just on the last thing you said, you mentioned consultative selling.
Yeah.
Selling. Yeah. People are coming to us for our content. So we are consultants. We're in a service-based business. We're no longer in sales, and that's extremely important. Yep. Giving them the advice they're searching for. And this is really the CarMax business model. It's no different. Arm consumers with all of the information and let them make their own decisions. Our job is just to analyze and guide them in the right direction.
Exactly.
So folks, this has been a great, Jesse, first of all, thank you very much. If you want to
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Please. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate your time. If you want to tell people how, further about call action or how to get more call action, if you have questions, again, folks, this isn't like, this is about personalizing your communication and relationship building through automation. That's what this is about. And it's extremely, extremely powerful, man. It really is. And I'm seeing it work with agents firsthand. And I love it. I love everything you're doing. So thank you for what you've created. And thank you for bringing it to light to our community.
Yeah. The thing is that here's one thing that's different about what we do. I'm someone who has basically been on the street, walked in your shoes, done those transactions. I'm not a technologist that's coming in and saying, hey, I can solve the world's problem without understanding the problems, right? Having done those transactions, what allows me to try and start thinking about all of these kind of micro touch points and what is going to help us be more successful. Because the only way that people are going to use our service is if you get an ROI from it and you become successful. And so, my goal is all about driving success. I'm totally transparent about that. I will do everything that we can in our power, and we try and share information that helps you be more successful. A lot of times that information has nothing to do with call action. So our goal is, if you want to learn a little bit more, you could go to help.callaction.co. That is all of our entire help documents. There's over 150 pages worth of documents in there. So if you're a Follow Up Boss user, you can type in Follow Up Boss. If you want to learn how to generate leads using Craigslist, you can type that in there as well. Any of that information is all available for free, open to the public. Take a look at it. Use the techniques. If you're not ready in your business to use automation, then all I'm going to stress to you is, be responsive. We know that this is what customers are wanting and what they desire. Number two, basically, take the time to engage the customer. If they're giving you the opportunity and selected you to talk to them, understand that they're not looking for you initially. They're looking to accomplish a task, and it's up to you to use that opportunity of the task to develop the relationship and show your knowledge.
Well put.
Once you do that, you're going to get that customer and they're going to work with you. Every online lead becomes a referral source if you do your job right. So this idea of online leads versus my sphere of influence should basically be thrown away, because the only difference with the sphere of influence is that the task that they're trying to accomplish is find an agent, right? A referral is someone who says, do you know of a good agent? That's the task they want. That's why that's such a laydown, right? But an online lead has the same identical intent. The only thing is that the trust has been transferred.
Correct.
The trust has been transferred by the other person. So it is up to us in any means, whether it's using text messaging to create a conversation or create an engagement, it's up to you to use that task and understand the context, develop the relationship, and be a consultant to be able to sell to that person, because you need to let them know that you're in their corner and you need to shed light in terms of what your service really is. Because if you continue to try and offload basically everything from the very beginning, the relationship building, again, smart people in technology will figure it out over time.
Well, they already have. I mean, it happened. Yeah. I mean, that's what email is today.
Yeah, we don't want to automate people out of business, right? And this is a really big thing. And if you think about it, automation should be used in the things to develop relationships, to take away all of the tasks that are difficult, not basically replace you. And so you is your ability to develop that relationship. And that's kind of our goal with this. So, get your leads, send a text message, be friendly, be personable. And when they start responding, continue that response and work on trying to get that person onto a phone call as quickly as possible. Do it through call action, do it through anything that you want. It really doesn't matter. We want to see you guys be successful, basically.
Super, super awesome. Thank you so much for your advice. And all of you guys, thank you for listening. We'll go ahead and post this up on our YouTube channel and on the blog and everything else. And the replay will be there available for everybody. Jesse, you're a stud. Yep. Thank you again. I look forward to meeting you or hanging out with you again very soon.
Yeah, very soon.
We will go from there, my friend. Thank you, folks, for listening. And we're going to start doing these a lot more regularly. So why don't you tune on in and start following it now? See you guys later.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great